Welcome back to Downton Kitchen, a show where we bring some of the most notable dishes from Downton Abbey right into your home. I'm Chef Nini Nguyen, and in this episode, we're cooking a popular dish from the Edwardian era, oysters au gratin.
Cheers.
Plus, we'll review some of my favorite moments throughout this season. Let's dive in. Historically, oysters were a popular dish for the wealthy and working class alike, until their scarcity increased and they became more of a luxury ingredient. Oysters were often served as canapes or hors d'oeuvres, but can appear as a savory finish to a multi-course meal. In Downton Abbey, we see oysters on the menu for Edith's wedding breakfast, with the downstairs staff also partaking in the enjoyment of this delicious delicacy. This recipe serves 6, so call your friends and let's get going.
Well done, Charlie. Always start as you mean to go on.
The first thing we're gonna make is the sauce. So I have my pot here. We wanna combine some butter, some wine, half and half, and a little bit of cornstarch. So we're adding cornstarch to this so that it really emulsifies and thickens the sauce. And we want to whisk this together just so that the butter melts. Now, to season this sauce, we're going to add a little bit of cayenne, a little bit of anchovy, and some lemon zest. So here, I'll show you a tip on how to zest lemons. Normally, people want to zest it this way, but you risk zesting too much of the pith. So I like to flip it over so I could see exactly where I'm zesting, and I rotate my hand, rotating the lemon as it goes. And so you want the zest of about a half of a lemon. Tap that in. A pinch of cayenne pepper, and of course you could add more if you like more spicy. And a little bit of anchovy. Anchovies might be a scary ingredient, but really it just makes the oysters taste more like the ocean. So we're gonna whisk this together, and as you can see already, the sauce is thickening. Whisk vigorously, don't be shy.
Unless you think it's wrong.
I most certainly do not.
As we wait for the sauce to thicken, why don't we revisit when I met Mr. Mosley himself to cook a veal and ham pie? Do you usually cook at home?
Yes, I do a lot of cooking at home.
Yeah?
Yes, I enjoy cooking.
What kind of cooking do you do? Or what kind of food do you like to make?
I suppose my favorite is French peasant food.
Okay.
You know, bourguignon and things like that. And yeah, sort of peasant food, really.
Yeah.
I'm a peasant, really.
I think it's the... No, you're not.
There's a different tradition in this country with pastry. I mean, it goes back, many, many, many years, and it's to do with the fact that the pastry was a means of transporting, the interior of the pie. It was it was discarded. It was just a means of, you open it up and then you eat the inside.
And then you just chuck
and
the
then you
rest.
just chuck to the seabirds or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't expected that the pastry was meant to be edible. So it was, as I say, it was just a means of sort of getting the food from one place to another.
We're gonna put a nice glug of that brandy right there.
Right.
Yeah, and the brandy's really going to give it a nice depth.
That's just a...
That's Downton Kitchen after hours.
Is that a glug?
That's perfect,
Right.
Yes.
What would you like me to do?
I can roll if you wish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Have you rolled dough
Please.
before?
Of course I have.
Okay, good. So a trick I find is to constantly roll and move. You're a professional. I'm gonna leave now. So when you were cast for Downton Abbey, was it really exciting?
To be honest, not particularly, because it was just, we didn't know it was going to turn into Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
So, as far as I was concerned, it was just another job. Well, as far as everybody was concerned, it was just another job, really. As it turns out, it was a 50-minute meeting that sort of changed my life.
You get 700 for writing the script. That would rise to 1,000 if the film is made.
For each script?
So once your sauce is thickened and it's brought to a boil, the cornstarch basically activates. And so now you just want to turn the heat off, give it another whisk to make sure your sauce doesn't break. And there you have this very luscious, creamy sauce that's going to be the best complement to these oysters. So here are our oysters. And when you look at them, you'll notice that the top is flat and the bottom is kind of like a cup. And that's where the oyster is going to sit in. Now you'll also notice that there's a little hinge on the skinnier side of the oyster. You're going to want to insert your knife where the hinge is. Now, to make sure we're all safe, you want to use a kitchen towel. And what I usually do is I would take my non-dominant hand and kind of cover it with the kitchen towel so that when I go in with my knife, if I accidentally slip, it won't cut me. So I'll hold it just like this. So it's in my hand like this, flip it open, and now my hand's protected. Now I'm going to use my right hand and take my knife and insert it into the hinge, and you'll feel it lock just like that. You want to twist your wrist, and then you'll see it'll pop up just like that. Once you pop the top, all you have to do is slide your knife, and you'll find a muscle that's attached, and you want to cut that, basically scraping the shell. And then once that's released, you'll see your oyster. So your oyster is connected from the top and the bottom. So you want to make sure you scrape that muscle on the bottom to really release the oyster. Nothing's worse than when you go to slurp an oyster and it's still attached to the shell. So what I like to do is I like to actually flip the oyster over so you know it's completely detached from the shell. While I shuck more of these oysters, let's watch when author Annie Gray stopped by Downton Kitchen to make scones, or was it scones? I heard you say scone, so it's S-K-O-N, not scone.
Well, a lot of people do say scones. It's kind of a north-south divide in Britain. So scones have a really strong association with Scotland, and the Scottish pronunciation of scone is scone. But they became very popular off the back of the tourist trade in the 1920s and 30s in Devon and Cornwall. And there, a lot of the time, people say scone. So still today, lots of people say scone, but more and more people say scone. I would always say scone.
In America, we say scones.
Say it again. Talk in that voice.
Do you think Mrs. Patmore would approve of my scone making today?
Oh, I think so.
We'll see about that.
She could do with some more help in the kitchen. It's been, what, like a decade and a half
I
with
know.
just poor Daisy.
Less philosophy, more elbow grease.
I think my scones might be a little fat.
Well, if they're not that ladylike, they can always go down for the housekeeper's tea. The thing about country houses like Downton Abbey in reality was that there's an awful lot of food being consumed by a lot of different groups. So you'd have something that was small and delicate and took a lot of time and was quite expensive for the family. But of course the servants also had to eat. And we see that a lot in the series. We see the Downton Abbey servants eating. So if these don't look quite good enough to go up to Lord and Lady Grantham and their family, they could always go off for Mr. Carson.
They won't mind. Not this once.
These are so nice and light and fluffy. I love how they're cracked in the middle.
They smell absolutely lovely. Milk?
No milk.
What?
Is that blasphemy?
We got through the war. We can get through this.
So maybe I should. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be adventurous today. Give me a nice splash. I want it proper. I want it however you want it, because I'm just gonna copy you.
That was a good decision.
Now that our oysters are prepped and our sauce has had some time to cool off, we're ready for the next step. I have a pan here with some salt, and the salt is to prevent it from toppling over when it's cooking. And so we're just going to nest all of these little oysters right on top of it. And so in New Orleans, we have charbroiled oysters is what we call it. And sometimes we grill it on an open flame. And we normally put Parmesan cheese, butter, and breadcrumbs And so this is very, very similar to what I grew up with. For those who might be a little intimidated by raw oysters, I think that this is a great way to introduce yourself to cooked oysters. This dish can be very familiar tasting just because of all the cream, the cheese, and the breadcrumbs that kind of toast on top of it. So now we're going to finish these oysters. So we have our sauce. I need some breadcrumbs, some Parmesan cheese. And you want to just make sure your sauce is a nice consistency. If your sauce gets a little too firm, you can warm it up just a little bit, just enough so that it's easy to spread onto your oysters. You want to get a nice generous spoonful per oyster so that you get the flavor throughout. And in New Orleans, we do this, it's really a butter, cheese, breadcrumb mixture, which is essentially what this is. And I personally like to get it a little bit on the outside shell, just like this. And so when we broil it, it turns nice and golden brown, and it just caramelizes the sauce right onto the oyster. So you get a little crispy bit, and the succulent oyster is just a perfect texture. And you want to make sure you give enough love to each oyster. This sauce really helps keep the oysters nice and plump, while the breadcrumbs that we're going to put on top is going to give it texture, because though this dish is very simple, the textures make it more complex. And when laying your oysters in the salt, it's very helpful to try to level it so that the oyster lays nice and flat, so when the sauce kind of melts on, it doesn't slide off of the oyster. If the oyster's kind of topsy-turvy, you'll lose all your sauce, and that's the fun part about this dish. Another dish that featured sauce this season was quail with bread sauce, where Kevin Doyle stopped by again to lend a helping hand. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you excited to cook with me today?
I'm very excited. What are we doing?
We're making quail and bread sauce.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. So I have here some milk, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to infuse it with a few key ingredients. And I'm just going to drop it into the milk. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this with bacon, just like that, and we're gonna tie it together. We tie it around the bird, kind of twist it over like that so it crosses in the back, and then we bring it forward. And to make sure it just doesn't dry out, you wanna just kind of make it all into almost like a little ball or dumpling so that they just stay nice and closed. You think you want to try to do this?
Oh, I should have been concentrating more. All right. Okay, I'll have a go.
It's okay. I'm going to coach you the whole way.
All right.
You're a professional. I should have made you do this the whole time. I think yours might be prettier than mine. And then I'm going to close that up.
Oh, wow. They look fantastic.
And now it's Kevin's cooking show.
Welcome.
Am I bound by the plot synopsis?
And just get it nice and glazed. Oh, that looks fantastic. Put that right on the side. I like to showcase the quail.
Oh, that's lovely. It's really lovely. Now I know what I've been missing.
Now, once you have all of the sauce evenly distributed, we're gonna season some breadcrumbs with some Parmesan cheese. So we wanna just grate it, and you wanna grate it quite fine. You don't want big chunks or shreds, because if you take the time to grate it, it'll melt a lot more evenly. This is how it looks like when I'm making pasta and grating cheese on top. Just kidding. To this, I'm just going to add some breadcrumbs. This is going to give the dish so much texture as well as flavor. The cheese is nice and nutty, salty, and it's going to go so well with the oysters. Make sure you get all the cheese from the bottom, because that's the good stuff. We're going to generously dust all of these oysters with it. And this is gonna look so beautiful coming out of the oven. There's many ways to enjoy oysters, from raw to so many different types of cooked preparations. And this is just one of my favorites. And I find that this is very crowd pleasing. Everyone enjoys a nice roasted oyster. They might not necessarily enjoy raw ones, but when you throw cheese and breadcrumbs on it, everyone's gonna love it. Now that our oysters are assembled, we're gonna put this in a preheated broiler for a few minutes, just until it gets nice and golden and the edges are nice and brown. Unlike the quick bake time on these oysters, the beef stew we made at the Downton Kitchen was slow cooked and layered with flavor. Let's take a quick look back. To dice an onion, there's two parts of the onion. There's the root side and the top. I'm just going to cut the top and lay that flat so it's nice and stable. Then I'm gonna cut down the root, so right down the middle. And this is going to keep the onion intact, and we're just going to peel the skin. We're gonna peel the first outer layer of the skin and set that aside. Just like that. To dice an onion, you wanna keep that root intact. And instead of using the front of your knife to cut little strips, I like to use the back of my knife. And the back of the knife is going to ensure that I don't cut through the root. We want to keep the root intact so that it makes a nice, even dice, and you have more control over where your knife goes. You could always see that. You're always guesstimating where that tip is, whereas you definitely know where the back of your knife is. And so I just cut it through just like that. And so when you open it, it's all together. And then you're gonna go back and you're gonna cut it the other way. This helps you have a nice consistent dice so that everything cooks at the same time. Now let's check our dumplings. Wow, this looks incredible. They're nice and plump and golden just from the liquid of the stew, so we can turn this off. All right, let's give it a taste. A little bit of the dumpling, a little bit of the beef, and just enough of that sauce to really put it all together. And that sauce becomes this luscious kind of gravy. That looks so good. You can really smell all of the flavors that we've put into this. The mushroom ketchup, the malt vinegar has like a nice subtle smell. I'm gonna finish it with a little bit of parsley. And wow, it might be rustic, but it also looks delicious. Now let's dig in.
Mind you eat them slowly.
We're gonna chop up some parsley for garnish. So we wanna garnish with a little bit of parsley for some freshness and color. Parsley is very traditional. You don't want something too flavorful because you don't want to cancel out the flavors of the oysters. You want something a little subtle but yet still fresh. I think our oysters are ready. Let's see. Wow, they're so beautiful and golden brown. You have to make sure you put your oysters on the highest shelf in your oven so that the broiler really caramelizes the top of the oysters. Look at these gorgeous oysters. They're so golden. You could see the edges have that nice crust, and you can really smell the cheese, even the little bit of wine that's gonna have that nice bright acidity to this dish. Look at these. We're gonna top them with just a little bit of parsley. And they're just so gorgeous. Look at that. And there you have it, oysters au gratin. This is definitely a show-stopping dish for any dinner party that's going to wow your guests. Thanks for cooking with us this season. We hope to see you soon as we come together over our next delicious Downton Abbey inspired recipe.